We've got one more session that we want to highlight. And let's see, I think Tom McDonald's available, Chris Rossi from Allstate, and joining them will be Kate Girk from EY. So please give a warm round of applause to our final speakers for the day.
Pronounced it right? I'm impressed. Okay. I was gonna say. Nicely done. Yeah, he's just getting hooked up to audio.
That's a great introduction that we are standing between this group and the cocktail hour. So. Okay. Do we have anything?
Sorry, we have no slides. We're good. We are nice and easy.
Last but not least.
Exactly.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. Cheers.
All right, so we are holding people up between, I guess, keynote and then drinks.
One more session.
Okay, good. So we're good. So hi, everyone. Very honored to be here. I'm Kate Girk. I'm a leader in EY's Insurance Finance Transformation Practice, and I'm excited to be here with Tom and Chris. Maybe, Chris, do you want to start with a brief intro?
Hi, Chris Rossi. Also excited to be here. So thanks for joining us this evening. I've been at Allstate since we put in SAP the first time back in the early 2000s, and now lead our SAP delivery center on the IT side at Allstate.
And Tom?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. Very happy to be here as well. Again, Tom McDonald. I like to say I've been happily at Allstate for 18 years, 20 years total. There were a couple of lean years at the very beginning, Hurricane Katrina and so forth. So I've had a bunch of different roles at Allstate in both finance and accounting. So I've kind of made my way around the company. Before Allstate, I was actually at EY doing, on the consulting side, doing a lot of what Kate does now in the role that Kate has. So that was always kind of an interesting kind of circular thing working with EY again. I am the overall kind of program lead for the S4 implementation at Allstate, and looking forward to having a dialogue today.
All right, perfect. Maybe Tom, we'll start with you. Do you want to provide a bit of background on Allstate and the 1F1P program, or One Finance, One Platform program, as we call it?
So let me kind of start with Allstate. We're on our own little transformation journey on the digital front. We have a customer value proposition that drives a lot of work throughout the company, and it's focused on really being simple and affordable to customers. So cheap and easy in the old, you might have heard it. But really, those are the two things that drive all the different programs. We have to make sure we're aligned to essentially what the customer wants, because at the end of the day, although this is sort of a finance and accounting project, the ultimate goal is to, again, try to sell more business to more people, as it is with probably every company in here right now. So again, a lot going on at Allstate, a lot of energy to really drive profitable growth. And as it relates to our program, kind of the whole transformation primarily around S4, we have three big goals. And we really focus a lot on these goals. We communicate and we make sure that whatever we're doing takes into account these three big goals. And the first one is going to be no surprise, because it's been a recurring theme in like every single presentation I've seen so far, which is around efficiency gains. So at Allstate, again, broken record being at the end of the day here, like a lot of manual processes right now in our reporting. I like to call some of our analysts like human staplers is what I refer to them as, because they kind of go around and collect data from various Excel models. So we just have a huge opportunity on the efficiency side, similar to what we saw on the slides next door earlier today. So it's great to hear folks talking about that, because we take that like very seriously, where it's not just kind of like, oh, some goal that we talk about in town halls. We literally have gone through like the whole accounting headcount and identified areas, not names type of thing, but areas where we really think we can get the most benefit. And so as we go through the program and we design, the different reporting or whatever the case may be, we know where we have to go to make sure we get these aggressive benefits that we're going after. The second goal is around empowering employees. So obviously finance and accounting resources, very competitive. Everybody wants the good ones. And so we've really made it a big target of this to to sell folks that you're going to get some state-of-the-art tools if you want to be in finance and accounting, which a lot of companies don't have. And again, we've heard about it today with some of the manual stuff that goes around. So it's really, you know, at the end of the day, we think of insurance as really two big things. It's, at the end of the day, you have people and you have money. You have money to pay claims and you have a bunch of people to develop systems and all that good stuff. So we don't have, you know, big theme parks and, you know, manufacturing plants. We kind of have people and money. And those are the big two goals for the program around efficiency gains, which is the money, and then empowering employees, which is really the people. And the third goal we have, again, which kind of combines the first two, is around innovation and continually innovating. So we are like guilty at Allstate, as a lot of companies are, around doing these big programs, getting a big chunk of money, spending it, getting the project done, and then sort of forgetting about it until you have to do the next implementation. I think we're replacing the ECC, which is 25 years old. So we want to get in this habit where we're, you know, it's an agile methodology. We're continuing to invest and improve systems and processes along the way.
Awesome, thanks, Tom. And maybe Chris, I mean, as you mentioned, Allstate's been a long-standing SAP user. Could you perhaps speak a bit to the scope that we're tackling as part of this program from an SAP standpoint?
Sure. So when we started our SAP journey originally, it's interesting that some of the same themes we had around simplification and efficiency were just as relevant then as they are now. And so a lot of what we had to do to get SAP up and running at the time was it didn't really have a lot of the concepts now that support the insurance industry. So we ended up customizing a lot of the ledgers and sub-ledger concepts. And then once we got the financials up and running, we kind of expanded it and really did take advantage of this full ERP kind of package, and even got some insurance solutions stood up with like collections and disbursements. We're into BPC, big BW shop. So we really got a lot of stuff stood up, including some things around Insurance Analyzer and FS Per and some other very specific insurance industry specific things. So very large SAP platform. So one of the things we're looking at here in terms of the innovation is, you know, we did get a lot of stuff rock solid. We did have a lot of solutions that have supported us really well over the last 20 years. But as you look forward into how these platforms support the business models we're trying to evolve into, you know, the business is much different than it was when we started this in 1998. And the platforms, the way we collect data, the way we analyze data has to support a lot more business models than it did at that time. So one of the things we're looking to get out of this is a lot more, I'll say one, we want to leverage the SAP functionality that's been developed. We were probably technically current in terms of, like, if you looked at all of our support stacks and things like that, we were like very much like on top of implementing, you know, the functionality, but we weren't very good at like rolling it out to users. So the systems were current, but they were using kind of the older functionality. So getting back to the standard SAP designs, taking advantage of the new capabilities that have been delivered, and innovating the processes along the way are a big part of this project.
All right, so probably everyone's favorite topic, so as we think about delivery strategy. So often programs like this can become unwieldy in terms of scope, budget, timeline. So what are some of the tools we've used as a program to make sure we're focusing on the right things at the right time? And maybe, Tom, we could start with you.
Yeah, so we have a big focus at Allstate on ROI and how we spend our money and make sure we're spending it in the best way possible. It's a company culture that's driven a lot by finance and accounting folks. I think our last three CEOs were previously CFOs at Allstate. So it's just sort of an expectation that we have inherent in our culture. So what we do is we look at all the different opportunities or work streams, or call it, you know, functionality within SAP or wherever else. And we want to make sure we aren't just boiling the ocean, like doing everything at the same time, because we think that kind of sub-optimizes the return that you're going to get on the specific investment. So we really, you know, take a pretty broad approach on how we look at all the different investments. We look at the costs and the benefits, and we kind of frame it as effort versus impact. So if you think of a 2x2, you know, the effort on one side and the impact on the other, and we look at all of our initiatives and take a ballpark as what we think, you know, like I said, the kind of the cost or the hours that you're going to spend on it relative to the financial impact or the risk that you're going to reduce. And we kind of plot them all on the grid, and and as part of our planning process, decide which ones you go after. And what you do when you do that is you'll find that there's the low-hanging fruit, right, which is low cost or low effort, high impact, and those are the ones that are just like go for it because you know you're gonna get a significant benefit, and that will help pay for the rest of the project to some degree if you do it right. So that low-hanging fruit like is full speed ahead, and those are the ones that we're gonna obviously deliver on. And then the other ones, the tougher ones, are like the very strategic ones, which are high effort and high impact as well. And that again, you kind of get into the boil of the ocean. You can't do all 5, 6, whatever the number be at the same time. So we really try to, get some discussions going around and really have dialogue on which are the 1 or 2 big strategic buckets that you want to go after. And then the other ones are kind of the in-between buckets, low effort, low impact. We try to ignore those ones and really go after the bigger areas that you can get the best bang for the buck. And then obviously there are a few of them, they rarely make it that far, but it's kind of the high effort, low impact, which are just kind of the waste of time. Luckily we try to weed those out as early as possible. So I don't know, it's a disciplined approach. We try to simplify it as much as possible, but behind under the sheets there's a lot going on with trying to assess, how they all play out.
And then I know, Chris, from a delivery team perspective, we're also really focused on outcomes. So can you perhaps elaborate on that in the context of Allstate's broader strategy within IT and then how we're deploying that within our programs?
Sure. So it's very much aligned to what Tom said. A lot of what we're organizing our work around is making sure that the IT investment and the IT resources support the business outcomes we're trying to achieve. So having a good sense of which processes we're looking to modify, where are we needing technology to drive some of those process changes, where are there things we can do that drive change without the technology investment, but really understanding that the team has one set of objectives. So it's not like there's a technology team with one set of objectives and a business team with another set of objectives. Everybody's really aligned on this is what we're trying to do for this process, and what's the combination of business and technology themes that have to occur together to make those things happen. And then everybody kind of rallies around those through the project delivery.
This probably is oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, in line with that, one of our favorite analogies is we're a team, but we're not a golf team, we're a football team. And that again, over the years at Allstate, with all the various silos in these big companies, teams tend to operate as kind of a golf, we're a team, we're a golf team. Everybody kind of does their own thing. And then you add up the different, the 4, 5, 6 different scores and that's the team score. And when in reality, it's just a bunch of individuals doing their own thing that collectively is kind of called the team. And and that's kind of one of the things that we really try to fight against at Allstate. Compared to like a football team where you have one outcome that you're going after, you have one set of goals, and then everybody knows their role within that. But success is determined not by how low if you're the medalist in the round or whatever as a golf team, but success is winning the game. And even if if you think you had a good game and you ended up losing, what good is it type of thing. So that as Chris said, that's something that we shoot pretty hard for to make sure everybody's kind of working together.
And one other thing I'll just throw in there is when you look back at maybe where this wasn't true in our initial implementation, if you look at and I'm sure every company has the same experience, when you look back on some of the customizations you did, or you look at some of the things that you thought made you special, and you look back and it's sometimes it was just it had to work. Why did we think at the time that had to be special or different than how anybody else had done it? And so one of the big things we're doing here as part of this analysis is making sure we're investing the time in the things that do make a difference, that either do have some sort of business model enabler or lead to a competitive advantage, but other things that just have to work. Let's take advantage of what's there. Let's use accounts payable. Some other things are probably prime examples where we invested a lot of time and effort before in being different, and there's just probably not the reason to be that at least there was perceived to be at one time.
Maybe actually a good sidebar on that. So you speak to leveraging standard functionality where possible and doubling down, and this ties a bit to the effort, impact, and competitive advantage areas. Would you mind elaborating, maybe Chris, start with you, and then Tom, on some of the areas where we are doing that, what we're prioritizing from a perhaps going leading edge versus standard?
Sure. So one of the biggest things, back to if you've listened to any of our earnings calls or followed us at all in the news, which I'm not sure how big of a following we have, but our business model has changed a lot since it did in 1998. And while we're still very much insuring autos and homes and all that, there's a bunch of other stuff we do also. And so one of the areas that really does make a difference is a lot of time spent on some of our master data. We've kind of outgrown our master data models. We've outgrown kind of how we think about categorizing and reporting on the business, and maybe some of the structures we had in place made it harder to onboard new businesses. In fact, the whole S4 journey kind of got spurred on by the acquisition of a new business. So, that's one of the areas where we're investing, a lot of time in getting it right. Also understanding that it's one of the areas that once you, do so we're lucky to have a greenfield kind of S4 implementation. So understanding that some of these models are the things that it's harder to change later. That's where we're really spending a lot of time getting it right here in this first release.
Yeah, again, I always kind of start with the customer. Like, what are you trying to do to grow the place? Like, to be strategic in whatever you do, and being affordable is like a key driver, as I mentioned, the customer value proposition. So I've been the CFO of one of our business units at Allstate. I've worn a ton of hats, and it was funny with cost allocations. As you looked at your P&L on like a monthly basis or quarterly, you see a number on there, and there's like nothing under, right? It's just like this shared service allocation that you get. And you can't control it. You don't even know what it is. If you had to make calls to figure out what it was, it would take you like all day. So at the end of the day, you just kind of throw in the towel and say, well, it is what it is, right? It's like paying your real estate taxes or whatever. You just, you're stuck with it type thing. But what I think, and we've talked a lot about this in our little 2x2 deal, is if we can take those allocations and we can make them, number one, more transparent. So again, it's like a real estate tax bill. At least in Chicago, they give you all the detail, like how much is going to the fire department, how much is going to the school board, all the way down. And at least you have, you gotta pay it, but at least you have some transparency, which is kind of nice, because then if you don't like something that you're paying for, go out and vote for somebody else that's not going to stick you with these costs. So this degree of transparency and controllability to once again reduce costs so we can make our product more affordable to consumers is super important. So we're implementing PAPM. Kate's done a phenomenal job helping put the methodology together to help us, help us be able to talk about transparency and really what people are paying for throughout the company. And I really think like that might be the biggest thing that we do on this whole thing, is if we can make it more controllable so that people that are paying the bill actually know what they're paying for, and they can say sort of yea or nay.
Yeah, and I'll probably elaborate on that a little bit. So I think, and that gets into cost allocations also being a subset of trying to push more data into the hands of the end users and enable them with effective tools. So just to tie the thread between, Chris, what you mentioned in terms of redesigning our master data, big focus of that has been creating flexible reporting and enabling self-service reporting, moving to standard reporting, et cetera. And then similarly, from a cost allocation methodology redesign, how can we create transparency, controllability, and visibility into pre and post allocated expenses such that the end users can drive more insights from them. Okay, so maybe it just is a great segue into S4 as a catalyst for transformation. So maybe Chris, I'll start with you. So as we mentioned before, Allstate's been a long-standing SAP client. I think perhaps even maybe, hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn, one of SAP's first insurance clients in North America, with a very mature SAP footprint today. So perhaps from your perspective, what are you most excited about as it relates to SAP S4? The solution in terms of like how it's fitting within Allstate's broader architecture and the value it will deliver.
So, anytime you get a chance to go back and redo something you did is exciting. And I think, getting this kind of an investment in a finance set of processes, which isn't necessarily the first thing folks think of for a transformation. So that's exciting in and of itself. But if you look at like the overall Allstate architectures, we're trying to get more real-time processes. We're trying to do things and get data into hands of people faster. And you look at some of the stuff we're setting up here and how S4 is helping to enable that, it really does fit nicely with the overall strategy. And while we probably won't get to like, instantaneous close or real close or some of these things that we can get, in organizations that can be a little less batch intensive, we are going to be able to start to see, I think, the results of some of these transactions a little differently than we do today. So back to the transparency. And then the other thing that it aligns with really well is we're moving to a lot more web service-based organization. We're moving, a lot of things to the cloud. So this is another opportunity, for us there that S4 fits nicely into that model. So the good news is that the whole S4 setup, but from an infrastructure perspective to a functionality perspective, is more aligned with where the overall IT organization's going with non-SAP apps than what we have in the ECC world. So it's going to allow us to support from a financials perspective how the rest of the organization's evolving their IT as well.
Perfect, thanks Chris. And then I know Tom, we spoke a bit about it, but as you think of, we obviously have high ambitions from an SAP S4 perspective. Where do you see the greatest opportunity for benefit, cost allocations or beyond?
Yeah, I mean, again, I talked about the goals. We're trying to drive out costs. We're trying to empower folks. We're trying to create this culture of innovation constantly, so we're always getting better. So, I think the strength maybe isn't in just like one of the three pillars. I think it's probably in all three pillars collectively. And we're trying to, and I'm going to be somewhat provocative here because this is, we throw this out here and you get finance and accounting people that are kind of like, or not this group, but like our employees who you talk about this stuff, and they're kind of like, I'm not following you. And it's around the purpose, about why we're trying to do all of this. It's not just to get better external reporting. It's not just because somebody's interested in, seeing the 5 line items that make up whatever they're paying for. But like the purpose of this, at the end of the day, like we're trying to drive costs out so we can lower prices to our customers or consumers so that they'll buy more and then we'll grow and then we can reinvest. Like there is a broad purpose that this project, if you viewed it as kind of an accounting project, you might, get kind of excited about it. But if you really view this as trying to, let the good hands promise enable people to be with Allstate, and we take care of you basically when bad things happen. If your house gets knocked down by a hurricane or you get in an accident, like Allstate's there for you. And like that purpose is like, it excites me. It's like, oh, that's kind of cool that you're able to do that for people. And so if you can draw that connection somehow between those three things I talked about and getting people to improve cost allocations, or like self-service reporting is another one I could talk about for a while, that people just love that because they don't have to make phone calls to IT people to build reports. So there's a lot of stuff going on out there, but I think again, if you're talking about how you can really make this come together as a project, it's really creating that purpose on why we're doing it and how ultimately this will help the company, grow profitably and get more customers, all that good stuff that every company in here is trying to do as well. So, I mean, that's like I said, that's my town hall pitch. It's a little better than I just did. A little more, just a hair better than I just did. People actually kind of smile. But yeah, so that's kind of it.
All right, perfect, thank you. And I know we wanted to leave a lot of time for questions. Maybe I'll just open it up for like any final comments or thoughts or considerations to share with the group before we switch over to Q&A.
Nothing.
No? All right, maybe we'll just open it up for questions. We've got 7 minutes, so I'm happy to really cover anything that's top of mind for folks. Cool, or we can chit-chat. Would folks be interested in agile delivery? Because that's a whole host of questions we can chat about too. Yeah, should we do that?
You can answer that one.
Yeah, Z, do you have a question on agile? Yeah, okay, so we did talk about outcome-based delivery for a bit. So maybe Chris, I'll open this up to you. I mean, Allstate, like many other programs, are deploying agile or hybrid agile-based delivery models. So can you share some insight into how to most effectively deploy it on a program or lessons learned that we have from the Allstate program?
Sure. So I think, the agile journey we've been on for SAP as a company started, I think really 4 or 5 years ago. We transformed most of the IT delivery into an agile delivery model. And we've always kind of had SAP in kind of this hybrid mode because there are aspects of Agile that work really well for an SAP project, and there's other things where you do have some more structure you need in terms of there's certain times you can deploy things, there's certain ways you have to deploy things, a lot of regression testing, data acquisition, all that kind of stuff. So lessons learned along the way. So one of the big things that I'll say that I've seen that is a benefit is aligning people into teams where they understand that line of sight as to what the process is that they support, and having that one team environment from like the business user all the way through to the IT developer. That's been one of the things that we have been really stressing, is that everybody on that team understands what the process is about, what you're trying to achieve with that process, and what's the best way to do it. And I think it's created much more alignment within the team when they talk about their work than what we had before was kind of an ABAP team or a basis team where it was all these kind of like handoffs. So having that like tighter delivery approach, I've seen as the bigger benefit. The other thing where I've seen where it's been beneficial on this project is the whole kind of experimentation approach of Agile and some of the seeing stuff rather than talking about stuff. The teams have done a lot of POCs. They've tried a lot of different things. Like even when we were debating what version of HANA to go live with, the teams, read some information and they deployed it in a sandbox and they tried it and they said, hey, you know what, this is going to be better than, the other options we had, or here's a new module or function that we thought about. So kind of like that experimentation phase and kind of proving ideas through working POCs and demos. We have every few weeks, we have kind of this project sprint review where teams are demoing what's in process or what they're thinking about. And I think it's really made a lot of the things a lot more tangible than just kind of talking about some, functional specs or deliverables in the traditional sense. So that's kind of the benefits. Now, the flip side of that, I think, and why the hybrid part is important is, there does still have to be some, definition of done, and like, when are we going to get there, and how much work and how many sprints is it really going to take? And so I think that's the part that we're evolving and changing and adapting as we kind of go from phase to phase of the project.
Maybe I'll elaborate a bit on seeing is believing. So all states, especially working with the accounting and finance organization, they've been using the legacy ECC solution for 20 plus years. So oftentimes we'll come in and try to push or encourage a change in how master data is structured or how to process information. And I think a lot talking in terms of concept really isn't driving alignment or decisions. So we found, getting a use case from what exists today and modeling it out in the future state environment has really helped to kind of connect the dots for folks in terms of the art of the possible and how that translates into the future. So that's really resonated, I think, as we've worked through design with the team.
How long were your sprints, and how did you deal with like an MVP? Right, in the accounting space, what is my minimum viable product? I need to be able to process. How did you manage that process? Because I'm finding that very interesting because some of our admin platforms want to do an MVP, and when you have a claim or a policy or whatever we have for life insurance, that gets to be a struggle. Is what's this minimal viable product I need to have?
Yeah, so I would say we've kind of adapted our sprint cycles. So I think right now for this project, we're on a 3-week sprint cycle, and then we kind of use that against the scaled agile framework of PI planning. So those, I think, are about 12 weeks. And so, it's been a learning to try to figure that out. I mean, honestly, like the MVP concept, I think it varies on a project this size. This will be the largest agile project we've done in SAP. So I think looking at what's the initial deployment, what are the subsequent deployments, how do you get enough functionality so that it's meaningful, but yet still leaving room for future phases and not loading everything up where it's a risk-based kind of big bang like it was. That's actually a conversation that we're having right now. But I think if I've seen like some of the other projects we've delivered, what I found is having that business alignment and having that negotiation about what works and what would be okay. That's how we've made our way through it. So it's not like a perfect answer. It's been more the business and the tech team finding out for this process, what's more important, get it live in the system, and what outcome are we trying to prove out? Which piece of the process is most important to see working in a productive environment.
then maybe to that end, maybe Tom, you could also speak to some of the discussions we're having now. Obviously, we're in the midst of a really long program, and how do we start to show benefits sooner? So the process we're taking in terms of evaluating perhaps things to accelerate and
Yeah, I mean, this again is a great topic. We have a minute left here. That's tough. But with that said, you know, when I initially, like, I started on this program maybe, whatever, 9 months, 10 months ago, whatever it was, and somebody like that I have a ton of respect for outside of Allstate said, if you need to know how long it's going to take or how much it's going to cost, then Agile's probably not for you. And so I'm the finance guy, like, gets triggered when he hears that. It's like, oh my God, I don't know whether this is 10 million or 50 million. So I have come around, and I've come around in the MVP, like we do have some things we're looking at there, but trying to deliver value this year. Chris and I were on a call with our controller this morning. What are you going to deliver this year? Like, I want to know specifically what are the tangible outcomes that you can commit to that I think he gave us like 95% confidence level. So that's Chris and I have a homework assignment. We think we have good ones, by the way. But you got to have, like, Agile is good because you should deliver. Like these big bang 3-year projects, like that's from the 70s and 80s. I mean, that's crazy. It's a great conversation. You could dedicate a whole session just to that, for sure.
all right, so now we've got 10 seconds left, so thanks everyone for your time. Happy to chat if you have any questions after.